Alright, so I don't know if this is going to help anyone, but I decided to do a little camera comparison between my Kyocera DuraXV Extreme Plus, my Samsung S24 Ultra, and my Nikon D850. All of these have lenses that are around 24 millimeters in focal length. I believe the S24 Ultra is a little bit wider at 23 millimeters, and the Kyocera doesn't say, but it's probably closer to like 28 millimeters based on what I'm seeing here. And I have a 24 millimeter lens on my Nikon D850. Now, why did I do this comparison? One of the reasons that people don't want to give up their smartphone is because for a lot of people, that is the only camera that they have. I've been a photographer for my entire life, so this wasn't such a big deal to me, as I always usually have a camera with me anyway. But I was very surprised at how decent the camera on the Kyocera actually is. It's nothing amazing, but as you'll see in the comparison, it's not actually as bad as you would probably think. So for most of these comparisons, I'm going to put the S24 Ultra on the left, and I'm going to switch between the Kyocera and my Nikon on the right. So first off, I have this picture of a bookcase. If we zoom in, you'll see that the text on the Nikon is just a little bit more legible. And if we zoom out, you'll see that the S24 Ultra has a little bit more dynamic range. That's just because of the HDR processing that the smartphone is able to do that neither the D850 nor the Kyocera are able to do in camera. Now we have the Kyocera versus the S24 Ultra. And if we zoom in, you can see a clear difference, but honestly, it's not that bad. We can still read the author's name here. However, the image is very noisy and the dynamic range is not as good. As you can see, the curtain is completely blown out. Okay, moving on to the next picture, we have the FedEx trucks. And if we zoom in, you'll see that the Nikon D850 just has a lot more detail. You can read the year here in the bottom right of the license plate, and maybe even make out the month of July on the top right, whereas on the S24 Ultra picture, you can't really see either. Now, if we zoom out just a little bit here, you'll be able to see that the S24 Ultra with its HDR processing is able to lift up those shadows just a little bit better. However, in post-processing, you can do the same with the D850 and get those details back. Now switching over to the S24 Ultra versus the Kyocera, we can see that the colors are not really that great. We can see a lot of green on the left side here. And again, the detail is also not great. We can't really read the word commercial at the bottom of the license plate there. All right, here's another picture of the FedEx trucks. We have the S24 Ultra on the left and the D850 on the right. If we zoom in, we can see that the D850 just has a lot more detail. If you can clearly read FedEx.com and the phone number, and it is readable on the S24 Ultra, but it's not as detailed. And you can read the license plate on the D850 picture, whereas it's kind of muddy on the S24 Ultra. Now switching over to the Kyocera, zooming into the picture, we can see that the FedEx.com on the truck door here is legible on the S24 Ultra, whereas on the Kyocera, it's just not readable at all. All right, moving on to the next set of pictures here, we have this Lewis auto sign. And you can see that the S24 Ultra just does a lot better job at lifting up those shadows in camera, whereas on the D850, you will have to do that in post. I will say I like the colors in the D850 a little bit more. They look a little bit more natural. Switching over to the Kyocera on the right here, it's the same story. The S24 Ultra does a much better job at lifting up those shadows. However, I don't think the Kyocera looks that bad here. I actually like the colors a little bit more. Moving on to a different picture of the Lewis auto sign here. If we zoom in a little bit, we can see that on the S24 Ultra, due to the HDR processing that it's doing, we can see a little bit of haloing going on in the sky around the sign, where it's trying to boost up the exposure on the sign, but it's bleeding over a little bit into the sky as well, whereas we don't really have that issue on the D850, although it is darker. Now switching the D850 picture here over to the Kyocera. Again, I don't really think this looks too bad. Yes, it's darker, but there's no haloing going on, there's no unnatural processing, and I actually kind of like the colors a little bit better on the Kyocera. Okay, switching over to this picture of a plane. These look pretty similar, but if we zoom in, again, we can see a lot of haloing going around this tree here on the S24 Ultra. Because of the D850's larger sensor size, it's able to capture all that dynamic range in one picture, and it doesn't have to do any compositing to get that. Now, switching over to the Kyocera, we're going to see a huge difference. The Kyocera just exposes for the bright sky, and we're left with a very dark plane, and I think the S24 Ultra definitely does a better job taking a picture in this backlit scenario. Switching over to the other side of the plane here, I think the D850 does a much better job with the colors, especially in the sky. Switching over to the Kyocera on the right here, I think the Kyocera actually does a better job than the S24 here. The colors look a lot more natural, and it looks a lot closer to the D850's colors. However, you'll see that if we look at the sky here, there's a lot of noise that's not present on the S24 Ultra, which goes to show that no matter how ideal the shooting conditions are for the Kyocera, you're never going to get a super clean image with no noise. There will always be noise even in broad daylight. All right, moving on to this picture of my FX30 here, we can see that the S24 Ultra is able to achieve a blurry background. However, it is distracting and not very high quality. And as you can see with the D850, we're able to achieve a much blurrier background and shallower depth of field thanks to its large full-frame sensor. Now switching over to the Kyocera here, we can see that the background is basically the same clarity, same sharpness as the camera, and we're just not able to achieve a shallow depth of field with the Kyocera at this distance. Switching this picture of some foliage in my backyard, the D850 looks really nice in terms of its colors. The S24 just doesn't do the colors any justice here. The sky is just the wrong shade of blue. Switching to the Kyocera here, the colors are a lot more muted, and I don't know if I really like either of these pictures, but I think if I had to pick one, I would probably choose the Kyocera just because we can maybe boost those colors and make it look a little bit more natural in post, whereas I think the S24 Ultra is just a goner. All right, switching over to this picture of some leaves, we can see that the S24 Ultra is able to achieve a blurry background, and it's not too bad for a phone. Again, the D850 just blows the S24 Ultra out of the water as far as achieving that smooth, blurry background. Switching over to the Kyocera, again, we can see that the depth of field is just so wide that there's just no chance that you're going to get a blurry background. All right, for these last two pictures, it's just between the S24 Ultra and the Kyocera. Here's a night picture. Zoomed out, they look pretty similar, but if we zoom in, we can see that the S24 Ultra is a lot more detailed, whereas the Kyocera is just very fuzzy, even a little blurry on the left side here. Here's the last picture, and the S24 Ultra is definitely more detailed, especially in the shadows. However, I do like the Kyocera picture more. The colors to me look a lot better. The Kyocera just has a lot more warmth, and the vintage look to the photo just matches the car. Now, while the pictures from the Kyocera and other dumb phones might not really be high quality, I think they serve the purpose well of just documenting and capturing those memories that you want to capture, because for most people, that's all they really use their smartphone photos for. For those of you that pick a dumb phone with a worse camera, or if you're just not happy with the photos that the Kyocera is able to produce, there are a lot of high quality point and shoot and entry-level mirrorless options out there that are going to take much better pictures than a smartphone. All right, so there you have it, a little camera comparison between the Kyocera DuraXV Extreme Plus, the S24 Ultra, and my Nikon D850. That wasn't such a big deal to me. I should stop doing that.